God morgen alle sammen. Håper alle har fått seg kaffe og noe å spise. Gøy å se så mange her. Det er ikke alltid det er fullt hus, men det er veldig, veldig spennende å snakke om det vi skal snakke om i dag, og det er vel derfor vi er så mange også. Dette er altså et frokostmøte arrangert av Faktisk og av Oslo Redaktørforening. Jeg heter Kristoffer Rønneberg, jeg jobber som journalist i Aftenposten, og har, som dere har sett bak meg her, lekt meg litt i Midjourney i det siste. Kommer tilbake til det. Jeg slår over til engelsk nå, fordi våre første to gjester er fra USA, og forstår dermed ikke hva jeg sier nå. So I'm just saying I'm going to switch over to English now. And I'll start by quoting something I saw in a TV series just a couple of days ago. One of the more fun series I've seen lately, Beef. And the main character, Amy, she says there at some point, all you have is perception. There is no objective truth. You create the truth you want to inhabit. Og det tenker jeg kan være grunnlaget for noe av det vi skal snakke om i dag. Forgot to switch, sorry. Now, one of the things we often hear, like we did in this quote from Beef, is that we get to choose our own reality, that we're sort of in the post-truth era, where we can select whatever version of the truth that we prefer. If you think that Joe Biden stole the election in 2020, you're not alone. A clear majority of Republicans think the same thing. And why do they think this? That's because they are fed enormous amounts of disinformation from social media, from TV media, from people selling pillows all over the place. They get to hear this version of the truth, and that's why they believe it. Disinformation, to quote another piece of another cultural phenomenon, is everything, everywhere, and it's all at once. And it's getting easier to produce. Now, just look at this image that I created in Midjourney. I mean, it's not likely, but it could be true. And how about this new hobby that Donald Trump has started engaging in? And I was very surprised when I heard that in the Kremlin, the president has this photo hanging on the wall. Who knew? We'll hear later from Eirik Solheim at NRK Beta, and he wrote an article last year about DALL-E, the image generator, and he used an example of a panda playing a guitar, saying, wow, you can even make an image of a panda playing a guitar. And that's the image on your left that he used as an example 1 year ago in DALL-E, and it was phenomenal. And now you can see the one I made yesterday in Midjourney. So the development is just incredible, how quickly things are going and how realistic these images are now becoming. But of course there are many forms of disinformation that are much more subtle than a panda playing a guitar. In the Ukraine, we see how Russia is spreading disinformation. They did so before the invasion, and they're still doing it. I had a meeting yesterday with a representative from Taiwan, and he was talking about how China is every day. He said it was 1 million cases of either cyber attacks or pieces of disinformation coming into Taiwan, trying to soften up the population so that they become less critical of the Chinese government and more critical of their own. In case the invasion were to happen, the population is more adapted to the rule of the CCP. Now, the goal of this type of disinformation is not always to create a new reality or to make people believe you. It's to make you stop believing in anything, to start doubting truth itself. And I'm sure that's a topic we're going to get back to very quickly. So we're very lucky today to have 6 people who will be coming up on the stage throughout this hour who can make us all a bit more informed about disinformation. First off, we have Mark Pfeifle and Bob Jensen, 2 experts in communication and crisis handling, especially with extensive knowledge about the public sector and the private sector. Currently on an intensive tour of Europe, just came in from Sweden, where we've been meeting with the government officials and defense officials. And you also have a lot of experience in analyzing and handling disinformation and trying to protect against it. So we're very excited to hear what you have to say about all of this. And also, of course, AI and how artificial intelligence is making this problem just more difficult to handle. After we hear from the two of them, we'll have a short Q&A. Maybe some of you guys have some questions. And then we'll bring up a panel of some excellent experts who will be talking to us in Norwegian. And we'll do a Q&A with you guys after that as well. But first, please welcome to the stage Bob and Mark.
I'm American, so I speak loud anyway. So, you know, that's the old joke about Americans coming to another country. They figure if the native from that country can't understand, just speak louder, right? So, okay, come on up here, Mark. So this is what we're going to talk about: saving truth. Y'all, if you're connected with the media, you're trying to write the truth. You're trying to, you know, explain a story and help the public understand both complex things and everyday things, you know, whether it's basic news or whether it's in-depth investigation. So right now, we're in a post-fact era. I mean, this is a big challenge for us. So we've got a lot of photos too, and this was created in mid-journey in probably about, you know, a couple of minutes. This was put out right a little bit after President Trump said, next week I'm going to be arrested by, you know, in a witch hunt. It's unjust, and he wanted to stoke his followers. This was put out, obviously not real. There's another one that was put out about Boris Johnson. Again, created in minutes. Now, if you know, you can look at that and go, oh, it's probably not real. But if you saw that on your smartphone and you're just not a journalist who is taught to question, you'd probably go, oh, well, that's probably real, right? So that's the challenge.
That is what his hair looks like.
It is. It usually is like that, right? Here's one I love. And let me see if we can get this to go. Oh, there's no...
Glam again.
Oh, let me try.
Let's make America glam again.
I'm the elephant in the room, and I'm not afraid to sparkle.
They call it trickle-down fabulousness.
I believe in limited government, but unlimited glamour.
Don't tread on me unless you're wearing fabulous heels.
GOP stands for Glamour on Point.
I'm a fiscal conservative, but I'll never skimp on style.
Stars, stripes, and stilettos. Now that's what I call liberty.
I'm here to cut taxes and sashay away.
God we trust, and in glam we must.
I'm here to filibuster with flair, Queen.
I love that because you could probably tell which side of the aisle I'm on. And my dear friend Mark was very uncomfortable there. But
No, I thought Ted Cruz looked really good.
So this is where we're at today, and this is, you know, depending on the country, there's going to be different degrees of this. But governments and organizations dealing with disinformation today, they're still focused on responding to disinformation. Respond. Oh, there's a piece of disinformation. We better debunk it. There's a piece of disinformation. But the reality is, while yes, you have to do that, that's really what, especially if you're dealing with nation states, that's what you want. You know, the Russians, they can throw about 1 million things out there and watch us run around and try and deal with that. But what we need to, and most of the efforts across the world are in silos, right? And this is the other challenge. So there needs to be a lot more integration, a lot more sharing of information to kind of deal with this. Most governments are not matching the evolution of the media space. Now here, I heard that the trust in media is still very high, which is great. We heard the same thing in Sweden. 75% of the people have great trust and confidence in their media, especially their public media. We don't have that in America. The trust level in America for media has gone really down, which corresponds with our public being very divided. I mean, I know you guys read the news and probably wonder what the heck's going on in America. It's not as dystopian as it sounds, but it is a big challenge.
But we did travel here to get out of there.
So we had to let's get out of America for a little while.
What we saw in Sweden was their challenges. They may have a large percentage of the population that supports their public, their state media, but they're still being inundated by disinformation because they've applied for NATO partnership. So where this is a whole new world for them, as they've seen. Mm-hmm. And one issue taken from their social services world in December of 2021 is still a story today that they're trying to manage and put to rest. Yeah. So if they allow it to be siloed and to focus just on responding to little items, it just turns and it goes out of control, which is what they've seen. So what we're trying to do is help governments prepare and help citizens prepare for those type of situations, especially as Vladimir Putin has completely changed the game by invading Ukraine.
Right. And so in the introduction here, was talking about how there's a lot of things that are going on, and the war in Ukraine is very different. So the war in Ukraine is called a hybrid war, right? And the fact is, the war against Ukraine started well before 2014. You all know this. I mean, they were getting hacked, they were getting hit, they were getting disinformation. In fact, the whole referendum in Crimea was a disinformation campaign. And that was Putin testing things. And what was really kind of sad at that time is he took over Ukraine with this fake, and I'm going to use that term, fake referendum, and looked around. No one's doing anything. So he got away with it, right? And I think that that was a little bit of Western appeasement. That's my opinion. I won't speak for governments, but I think that everyone kind of went, well, maybe he'll stop there. Obviously not. And that's what I think has everyone kind of looking around today, because, again, hybrid war, the military calls it gray zone warfare, right? And so Sweden, right now, in my feeling, is they're getting hit already in a gray zone act of war. That another country will start putting disinformation in to create division. That's not what good neighbors do. That's an aggressive act, right? It's just like if another country comes in and uses cyber attack, which they will be doing as well, because it's all kind of coming together and takes out your power or destroys your banking system. That's an attack. That's an aggression, and that's gray zone war. It's like, it's not a bomb dropping on you, but it might as well be, right? The amount of damage caused can be very similar. So it's something you have to think about. So there's this whole shift in ideas of trust, fact, and the truth. There's an evolution. I'm not going to go through this, but I think in America, the most trusted source of media, of information, is local media. That's the most trusted source, and it's going away. Newspapers are shutting down. All the radio stations are being bought up by big conglomerates. The news, they don't have local news rooms anymore. It's all, pumped in electronically, over the internet from some centralized area. So this is kind of what's happening in the U.S. And then the media, this is going to be a challenge. The media is using AI to generate stories, because as they have less advertising dollars, they have to cut staff. So now one reporter has to, and then they also have convergence of media, where the radio and the TV and the newspapers all kind of work together, and they make that poor reporter, and now you got to do a radio story, and you got to do a little short clip for TV, and you got to do, there's more and more and more, and fewer people to do it. So I don't blame them for looking at using AI, but I think there's got to be some rules about it, because who says that what you get on AI is the truth? You have the responsibility of fact checking and confirming your information, and it should be it's the same in America, but sometimes we'll just use a little AI here, and they don't even, and many times they don't acknowledge that they use AI, and that will cause more erosion of trust.
So today, what we see is that facts are no longer said as truth. there is an alternative fact to the truth as well. And what we see as misinformation or disinformation is taken from a kernel of truth, and then it's exposed and thrown about in a way that is disinformation. And when that happens, they're tearing apart in some aspects of our society where there's already a challenge within our socioeconomic world, between the rich and the poor, along religious groups, along race, sexual orientation, and other areas of our society. And in the U.S. and other places, they've tried to drive a wedge between these different groups to change our behaviors, to cause us an emotional factor where we get upset, we get irate, we learn things or we believe things that are not true because of that disinformation. A lot of it coming from areas such as China, such as Russia, or actors that do not have our best interests at heart. And the opinions and perspectives are changing the factual basis. Now it's opinion news instead of just the facts news, the Associated Press, the BBC, those types of things. Now it's very personality-driven, and it's very opinion-driven by the personalities in the media. COVID disinformation further pushed that. Get a vaccine, don't get a vaccine. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask. You're taking over my liberties. What are you trying to do? 6 feet, I don't want to stay 6 feet apart from anybody, although we're like 15 feet apart now.
We're safe.
Yeah, Dr. Fauci would be happy that we're here. And the public doesn't understand what disinformation is, because they're just being inundated by information every day to the point of what we've never seen in the past. Between TikTok and Instagram Reels and Stories and Facebook, and is Twitter still up?
I admit I'm still on Twitter.
He's still on Twitter. I am too. And then our traditional media and everything else is just hitting us with all this information, and we're trying to digest it in a democracy to put our ideas together so we can have a working society, and we can go to the voting booth and we can make good decisions. But because of artificial intelligence, because of disinformation, because of the actors that are trying to drive us apart, it makes it very difficult and very challenging in the information arena to figure out what the world is going on.
And of course, when we used to work for government, obviously in America, the lack of trust in government makes it even harder for the government, as we tried to say, look, no, this is the truth, right? For example, all the challenges about vaccination, about what you need to do to prevent or to stay safe from COVID. There was a lot of fighting of that. And of course, when the government comes out and goes, no, we're base this on scientific fact, right? And normally in the government, we'd say, well, gosh, that's going to just stop all in disagreement. It's scientific fact. But the public came back and went, of course you're going to say that. Of course you're going to lie to us. And so this is a challenge. I don't know that you guys have that kind of challenge here, but it is definitely a challenge in the U.S. I spent my entire career dealing with crisis communication. My friends who are still in government now, we talk a lot. And I'm like, boy, I'm glad I'm not you right now. It's really tough. And we have to change the way we do things. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So this is meddling by Russia in the 2016 elections. Obviously, this is not real, but they were going
It's
for...
not?
Oh, come on. This is, well, you might believe it's real, but this is hitting towards the religious, conservative, Republican far right. If Clinton wins, I win, says the devil. Not if I can help it, says Jesus, right? No one will think that's real, but what they're doing is they're hitting emotions, and that's one of the key things. And then what government tries to do is like, well, we'll just give them the facts. But facts aren't enough anymore, right? So they're hitting those emotional triggers, confirmation bias. The other side is a different tactic, not by president. That actually came from the Democrats. The Russians didn't make that saying up. The Democrats used that saying, not my president. So what they did was they created a fake event, like, oh, we're going to have this demonstration. What they wanted to do, and they put that information around both Democratic and Republican influencers to have it go out. What they wanted to do was have the two groups come together and possibly fight. They wanted dissension and tension, and that was the point, right?
And they had a separate one for same date, same time.
Yep.
For the Republicans to show up, same date, same time for the Democrats to show up, hoping that they would all get there and they'd all fight.
Right. So
bring water, bring food, have a good time.
Bring the kids.
Bring the Molotov cocktails. It'll be awesome.
So this is, Mark and I worked supporting law enforcement during the Dakota Access Pipeline protest. You might have heard of it. It's a oil pipeline was being built very close to Standing Rock Sioux tribal lands. And so the Indians first, the Native Americans first started protesting, and then it became very advantageous to extremist environmental groups. They thought, oh, we can make money off this. And so what they did was they funded thousands of protesters to go in that area. Right? And so we were working with the law enforcement. We're saying, you're not pro-pipeline, you're not anti-pipeline. You're pro-law enforcement and public safety. That's what you're pro. You're just here to make sure everyone's safe. But they put out a lot of disinformation like this. Okay, oh, they're burning the teepees. Well, first off, the Indians live in homes just like the rest of us. And also, there aren't trees like that in the area of South Dakota. So we did a reverse search on that image, and this is where it came from. It was from an HBO movie. Right? And so what we did is, at that point, that was 2016, so we were still in the debunking mode. So we were like, this is where this came from. It's not really real. Because our counter-narrative, because the goal of the extremist environmental groups was not to really help the Native American tribes. They didn't care about them. They were raising money. So they raised like $5 million on GoFundMe accounts. And when we talked to the tribes, Standing Rock Sioux tribe, they're like, well, we're not seeing any of that money. I go, well, maybe you need to put that out, because they're gathering money from around the world. I saw things, Maoris for Standing Rock, Swahilis for Standing Rock, which is ridiculous. And yet the poor people in the Standing Rock Sioux tribe got $0 from that, right? Because it was a big disinformation campaign to raise money. So, and they did a couple other things. Here's another one they did. Oh, this poor little girl was bit by a police dog, by the militarized police. And so we did a reverse search on that. It happened years before that in Texas, right? Some little girl got bit in the face, and that's where they took that picture from. So what we're saying now is we're talking to government. So in Sweden, they created a whole ministry on countering disinformation called the Psychological Defense Agency. And of course, they're getting hit really hard because they are wanting to get into NATO. What's interesting about that whole Ukraine war is Putin drove and made the process faster of what exactly he said he didn't want, the expansion of NATO, right? Who would have thought that Finland and Sweden would say, hey, we want to join NATO? But he's the one who made that happen. So what we're saying, though, and we kind of said this to them, we're saying it to other governments, is we need to do a lot more prediction and prevention. You know, we're so focused on responding, and that's important, but then you're just playing into what they're trying to do. They're using up your resources as, oh my God, I've got to get this one. I don't know if they have a thing called whack-a-mole here. They usually have it at circuses where you kind of hit the little thing as head pops up. Oh, that's what they're doing. So what we're saying is start looking at prediction and prevention, and the more important thing is not just the individual pieces of disinformation, but what is the narrative? You guys know this. You're journalists. You look at narrative. You could play a huge part in helping figure that out. Why is China saying whatever, right? As was said earlier, where they're kind of softening up the population. Why is Russia doing X, Y, or Z, right? Then that's the type of contextual reporting that would really help the public better understand all these really weird things that they're seeing.
So how do we address this going forward? And it really comes from three components. One is, are we working collaboratively? So groups such as Factiste, the government working with the EU, with neighboring countries, to make sure that we're in a coordinating aspect, that we have trained professionals that are every day working to fight back against disinformation proactively and reactively. And do we have individuals who are trained, who are given the authorities and the policies to effectively combat this effort? And then are we funding it? Do we have the monies and the government resources and private sector resources moving forward, so that in this time ahead of the media and the challenges with social media, artificial intelligence, and everything else in our society that's coming up that we can't even predict, that we're set up and we're ready to go in the future, so we can have healthy democracies, we can have a successful civil society, and we can have, in some ways and hopes, of a peaceful tomorrow?
So I'm going to go through real quick.
I think we're like getting to the point of.
Yeah. We're gonna go.
We could go for a long time here, folks.
So this is what we're saying to governments, that they need to create a national coordinating function for government. I'm not saying they are going to coordinate what you do, but they need to coordinate what governments are going to do. They need a national strategy. Most countries, including the United States, do not have a national strategy to counter disinformation. And the other thing, there needs to be global and joint information sharing. So, for example, the way we're kind of doing okay with countering cyber attacks and cybersecurity is that globally, governments and the private sector are sharing and collecting the information. So every day, there's 100,000 new pieces of malware that are created, and because globally we're working together, we can identify those and quickly make patches. We're identifying all the malicious websites and sending that around. Hey, here's the IP address for 5,000 new malicious websites that you want to block. And so that's the only way that you can kind of win that war. And the same thing with countering disinformation is we need to all be working together. And then you all have a really strong position as journalists to explain to the public, because the public, right now, the attention span of the public most places is about like 3 seconds. Especially young people. You'll get young people, they're going to see something, and in 3 seconds, they're going to make a decision whether it's true or not true, whether they like it or whether they don't like it. Right? And so that's something that...
I think we've got to turn it over to Chris.
Yes. Okay, so we've got these slides. We'll share them with you. They have what we're telling governments and other organizations. So we're going to turn it over to Chris, because we'd like to also hear your questions.
Yeah, I'll just take the word briefly, and I'll turn it over to the audience straight away. I mean, short, very concise, but a lot of unanswered questions. Yeah. Anyone who wants to follow this up? It's early morning.
No one wants to be first.
Okay, but I can start. You're talking about prevention and prediction. And since we're a room full of people from the press, how do you see what's sort of labeled in a positive or negative way as the mainstream media or the editorially run media? How do you see the media taking a role in prevention and in prediction when it comes to fake news and disinformation?
Right. We're seeing some activities of the media kind of turning into the fact checker. In some instances, the Washington Post, for example, has a Pinocchio rating for, in many cases, disinformation is taking over. So it's a rating between one Pinocchio, which means it's just a little bit of a lie that's moving, to all the way 4 or 5 Pinocchios, which is pants on fire, all out lie. And unfortunately, what we're seeing in some cases is that if an issue just has one Pinocchio, they're just a little bit lying, the people are going, oh, that's great, we just lied a little bit. So it's still an enormous challenge with what our media is having. But the thing is that the media in some instances is so understaffed, and the business model for most journalism has so atrophied that it's difficult to just do your day job of reporting the facts and your beat, and then also keeping an eye out for disinformation. Although now there are entire reporters that are just disinformation reporters that are every day trying to hit back against information that's out there that's been turned in the wrong direction. The challenge that we have is that too much media is just opinion generated and click generated, and they get sucked into this disinformation world too often.
So I'll give you an example of where I think that the media can really help. So for example, I'll start with an example of how the U.S. government did what I call pre-bunking, meaning putting stuff out before it happened. So we had, through our super secret squirrel spies, we knew pretty much what the Russians were going to do. We knew they were going to attack Ukraine. We shared that information with most of the people in Europe. A lot of the European governments were kind of like, we're not really sure. Because we couldn't show them exactly how we knew, because that's sources and means. And then we also saw that the Russians were going to do a false flag. They're going to have some kind of explosion, say, oh, see, the Ukrainians are attacking. This is why we're coming in here, because we're going to save the Ukrainians from the Nazis. And when we put that out and said they were going to do that, one would think the Russians would go, well, let's do something different because the Americans already know we're going to do this. No, they did the same thing they said they were going to do. So the reaction across Europe was kind of like, oh, yeah, the Americans said they were going to do that. So that's called pre-bunking. That's where you kind of take away a lot of the power. Now, obviously, you all don't have people snooping in the governments like that, but you have something better than that. You have the ability to look at what's coming out of governments and what's being said and analyzing that and going, what are they trying to do, right? You start looking at the line of statements coming out of Russia. What are they trying to do? Because what they're saying, we have no intention of invading Ukraine, but we're going to put like 150,000 troops right here. What does that mean? So that's where you can look at that and do a little more predicting and saying, well, and even if you say, what if, right? That's really important. So those are the kind of things I think where media is in the space to do that. So. Good.
Question over here.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for a lively morning briefing. I have one question, but I would just like to say, start off with, I have a military background. I've been working with the media for some time as well. And 20 years back, I worked with NATO in NATO Stratcom. And already at that time, we were talking about the fact that most dangerous weapons didn't fire bullets. Mm-hmm. So I guess we've been in this for quite some time. What I would like to hear, though, is if you have some reflections on how what you've been touching upon plays into the military realm. Mm-hmm. We had a commission presentation yesterday, and for the first time, I think in that context, we hear also politicians talking about now the prospects and the threats and dangers of conflicts playing out under the threshold of war. Mm-hmm. And I think that then we're in that realm.
Right. The gray zone.
Yeah. And whether it's Ukraine or whether it's a hybrid war fought against other countries in Europe. Mm-hmm. But if you have any reflections on how this notion of this phenomenon playing into the military realm, and if you see any kind of differences, I presume that your focus is on the US,
right.
But we know that there's perhaps a slightly different school in Europe. So if you have anything to share, that would be interesting.
Sure.
Thanks.
Sure. Well, I'm going to start.
Yeah, so I think the big challenge that we have is figuring out what is going on in current military situation. What's the truth? What's the fact? What's information operations out there to shape our opinion? And so one of the stats that always comes up to me is this is what the Ukrainian government says is number of Russian troops killed and how many troops they've lost. And you kind of see in that whole world is there's probably they're reporting a number far higher of Russian troops that are killed and far lower of their troops that are killed. So we kind of see that shaping the landscape and our views on the war. Well, Ukraine must be decimating the Russian army, which is true to a point, but at the same time, they are taking on catastrophic losses at the same time. So we got to watch out that we're not doing a misinformation or a psychological operation on ourselves of some of the statistics that are coming out. Because yes, we want to be very supportive of Ukraine and of their activities, and of course, fighting back against Putin's aggression. But we also have to be cognizant that there's some information out there that is probably coded with some information operation in trying to get us to focus too much on one aspect of it.
Yeah. So I'm going to go on another end of that. So we spoke in Stockholm with the Swedish Defense University. They were very interested in countering disinformation. The military in most countries actually has the most cyber and the most information operation resources of that government. Right, it's the same in the United States. I guest lecture at the Defense Information School to teach military public affairs officers. The thing we just saw in the U.S. is they have indoctrinated, they've created joint doctrine on operating in the information environment. This is a brand new doctrine. You can get it online, JP 3-04. It's very different, and it's really focusing in on the fact that in gray zone and hybrid war, The military has to not just think about dropping bombs or protecting this bridge. They have to be thinking about what's going to be happening in the information environment. Now, NATO, and NATO is very good. They just had a strategic communication conference, and the one gentleman from the Swedish Defense University noted that the U.S. doctrine was a little bit different than NATO's, and I'm like, well, that's not bad, but as long as they can figure out how to work together, because if we go to war together, we've got to work together. But you might want to, if you're interested in that, it's called JP 3-04. Check it out. It's brand new. It only came out about a month or so ago, and I started looking at it as I was training military officers. So, and if anyone else wants to look at that, it's going to be a really good peek into how governments as a whole, because usually the military leads in those kind of things, how governments as a whole are going to have to deal with this.
A little leisure time reading.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, guys. Information and truth may be fluid, but one thing that's constant is time, and
right.
We're running out of it. So thank you very much, Bob and Mark, for all of this. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Og da vil jeg gjerne ønske velkommen opp til scenen. Vi har politisk redaktør i Dagbladet Lars Helle, medieforsker Bente Kalsnes, Eirik Solheim fra NRK Beta, og så har vi min navnebror Kristoffer Egeberg fra Faktisk. Så hvis alle fire vil komme opp, og kanskje bli ønsket varmt velkommen. Velkommen til dere. Jeg lurer på, Kristoffer, om jeg skal åpne med deg. Altså mest av alt på grunn av fine navnet, selvfølgelig. Men for å stille litt av samme spørsmål som vi hørte fra Bob og Mark her nå også, altså medias rolle i å håndtere dette enorme problemet som vi nå står overfor, som vi bare skjønner biter av. Så nå har jo du leder jo Faktisk, har stått i spissen for Verifiserbar, som startet i fjor vår. Altså erfaringer fra det, og hvordan vi samlet kan prøve å danne å lage en slags demning og kanskje å få publikum til å bedre kunne forstå hva som ekte og falsk informasjon. Hva tenker du der?
Jeg tenker jo at heldigvis er Norge en veldig så sterk kontrast i forhold til den hverdagen som Bob og Mark har i USA, hvor du ser på en måte den enorme splittelsen også blant mediene. Og det er jo faktisk et veldig godt eksempel på noe som jeg i løpet av de siste 6 årene virkelig har opplevd helt unikt i verdenssammenheng, også at konkurrerende medier, store medier som slåss om markedsandeler mot hverandre i hverdagen, faktisk har funnet sammen om noe de mener viktig, og det krever en del modige redaktører, som det skjedde den gangen for 6-7 år siden, da faktisk ble en realitet. Det var jo VG og Dagbladet, erkefiendene, som sto sammen, og liksom dette må vi gjøre noe med. Og så jo litt trist i forhold til litt sånn naivitet vi hadde den gangen på at vi trodde vi skulle demme opp for en utvikling vi så i utlandet, som vi ikke ønsket skulle komme her, som vi nå 6 år etterpå må erkjenne allerede var godt til stede i underskogen, men vi i mediene var kanskje mer opptatt av på en måte, hva skal jeg si, den offentlige samtalen som vi journalister ofte opptatt av, da, som ligger kanskje litt over den underskogen og de trendene vi ser på, spesielt på sosiale medier og nye medier, hvor vi kanskje har mistet litt kontakten med en del grasrot som vi så spesielt under pandemien kom ikke bare opp fra overflaten og inn i hovedstrømmen. Jeg tror alle oppdaget at de hadde både antivakser og anti-5G og anti-globalisme, altså den konspiratoriske delen i sin egen nærhet. Det så man på Facebook, men de kom også ut i det offentlige rom og sto foran Stortinget hver eneste uke i ulike demonstrasjoner, samlet rundt åpenbare konspirasjonsteorier og usannheter. Da. Og det jo en utfordring. Og når man da trekker det enda videre med invasjonen i Ukraina, så viste jo igjen de samme og enda flere redaktører i Norge at det går an å samarbeide om noe som så konkurranseutsatt som dekning av store nyhetshendelser, altså krigen i Ukraina, hvor igjen de samme bak faktisk, men også da titalls flere medier sendte ikke de hadde til overs, for det var ingen som har journalister til overs, men de beste ned til barn bak oss her, for å jobbe sammen om å verifisere nyhetsmediene. Så det liksom håp i det, samtidig som vi må erkjenne at de utfordringene, spesielt nå med KI, så overveldende, og ressursene som faktisk bitteliten i den sammenhengen. Altså redaksjonen til faktisk på 6-7 stykk, mot en desinformasjon og et fenomen som blitt mer og mer globalt. Det jo ikke alle de trendene vi ser i QAnon, det vi ser fra USA, det vi ser fra Russland, det vi ser fra Europa, det jo i Norge i løpet av 3 sekunder på TikTok, og treffer barna våre en uke før du og jeg som voksne i det hele tatt har fått med oss hva det handler om. Så, ja.
Ikke det mest optimistiske svaret?
Nei, men der Norge fortsatt et lite fyrtårn, fordi man har tross alt et redaktørkollega som evner å snakke sammen. Jeg ser bare i de skandinaviske nabolandene, de prøvde jo å få det til i Sverige. Et sånn type samarbeid. Det datt sammen etter noen måneder. De synes det veldig morsomt å invitere meg til Danmark og snakke om hvordan det mulig, ikke sant? For i Danmark snakker jo ingen med hverandre i redaktørkollegiet, mens Lars, Alexandria, Gard, Steiro, ikke sant? Disse vi faktisk på fornavn med, så kan man si at det kanskje ikke bra det heller. Men likevel har en tone og altså evner faktisk å snakke sammen om de viktige tingene i samfunnet. Og jeg tror oppriktig at norske redaktører bryr seg om samfunnet, og bryr seg om samfunnet mer enn de bryr seg om bunnlinja, og det jo på en måte det vi må samles om da, hvis vi skal lykkes både i forhold til å overleve som nyhetsmedier, men også den kampen om den offentlige samtalen.
Kanskje ta den ballen videre til deg, Lars, i og med at navnet ble nevnt her. Altså, en av utfordringene som også Bob og Mark var innom, at mainstream media mister troverdighet i møte med desinformasjon. Og vi ser i sosiale medier, i feeden, så det vanskelig å skjelne mellom hva som god informasjon og dårlig informasjon, hva som kommer fra en god kilde, fra en dårlig kilde. Det samarbeidet som Kristoffer snakker om nå mellom norske redaktører, det en måte å sikre, altså vi har et mindre problem med dette i Norge enn i for eksempel USA, men likevel, altså, hva gjør dere for å sikre troverdighet?
Jeg synes det et godt eksempel på at vi kan få til ting uten at de foreslo at staten skulle ta grep her nærmest, og det må de kanskje gjøre, men jeg tror det viktig at vi gjør mye selv, og jeg tror at en av styrkene våre at vi faktisk vi blir ofte spurt om, det ikke en hemsko å ha en egen lovgivning av medieansvarslov, ikke en hemsko å ha Vær varsom-plakaten. Jeg tror faktisk i disse tider så det en fordel for oss at vi skiller oss ut på akkurat de tingene. Og det at vi har fått et begrepet redaktørstyrte medier, som det står nå i loven, det var jo ikke, vi snakket ikke om redaktørstyrte medier for 10 år siden. Det var jo en selvfølge at medier var redaktørstyrte. Men nå det blitt et nærmest et stempel som ganske viktig, og viktig å hegne om, og det også viktig også at redaktørene da gjør som Kristoffer antar, at de faktisk føler at de har et samfunnsoppdrag på disse tingene. Så jeg tror at vi har en styrke i det rammeverket vi har, og at vi kan gjøre mye selv.
Hva det annet vi kan gjøre for å øke bevisstheten rundt hva som redaktørstyrte medier, og hva som informasjon som noen bare har villet fram?
Jeg tror at folk ikke så dumme som jeg tror. Jeg tror de ganske gode og sjeldne, og det mer, selv om det god grobunn for konspirasjonsteorier og sånne ting, så tror jeg folk ganske flinke i å se, særlig yngre mennesker som liksom vokst opp med den digitale virkeligheten, klarer å skille fake from facts i større grad enn mange andre. Og jeg tror at vi må bare være obs på det og bidra med forskjellige tiltak, ikke bare faktisk, men også sikkert i undervisning på skolen og sånn, at de kan lære seg å gjøre det. Og så tror jeg også at, altså jeg jo fremtidsoptimist, så jeg tror at vi vil få verktøy som gjør det lettere for folk å skille mellom det som viktig og ekte, og det som ikke det.
Bente, du har jo bokstavelig talt skrevet boka om desinformasjon, og og følger jo nøye med på utviklingen der. Vi kunne lese i Morgenbladet nylig at desinformasjon slett ikke så stort problem som vi ofte snakker om at det og at det i hvert fall ikke har blitt et større problem enn hva det var. At konspirasjonsteorier alltid har eksistert, og at noe av dette her en hype. Hva tenker du om den tilnærmingen?
Ja, for det første var det en veldig interessant artikkel som gikk ganske bredt ut og tok for seg veldig mange problemstillinger på en gang. Og en av kritikken mot en del av de desinformasjons- og falske nyhetsstudiene det at en for eksempel kanskje ikke har vært så flink til å definere hva det for noe. I spørreundersøkelser har jeg ikke sagt hva en spør om. Altså hvis en spør folk, har du sett falske nyheter i sosiale medier i det siste? Så har en kanskje ikke forklart hva det for noe. Og da kan det bli litt sånn varierende hva resultatet en faktisk finner. Et annet problem når det gjelder studiene av desinformasjon, det går nå på, veldig mange har sett på Twitter, og spredningen av desinformasjon på Twitter. Og grunnen til det at det har vært den plattformen det har vært lettest å få datatilgang til. Og så har en prøvd å skulle finne ut, har vi sett påvirkning av den spredningen som har skjedd på Twitter? Har det gjort at folk har forandret politisk mening? Og det noe veldig vanskelig å skulle dokumentere at en har sett den type effekt. Så fordi at en stor del av den spredningen av problematisk informasjon skjer i sosiale medier på plattformene, og vi ikke har datatilgang, for eksempel på Facebook, for eksempel på TikTok, ikke minst, og på Snapchat, og ikke minst altså WhatsApp og de lukkede kanalene. For eksempel så har vi sett studier fra India og fra Brasil, der WhatsApp har vært viktige kanaler for spredning av desinformasjon. Så hvis en får bedre tilgang til hva det som skjer på plattformene, der det primært spres, da det bedre sjanser for å kunne gjøre god forskning på det.
Kort kommentar?
Bare kort tilblikk på det også. Mye av den forskningen som ble vist til i den artikkelen også, handlet jo om to ting, altså påvirkning fra Russland, altså fra Kreml, og dette med anonym spredning av desinformasjon på type trollkontoer fra St. Petersburg, da, ikke sant? Og det jo noe vi også opptatt av faktisk i 6 år, så har jeg prøvd å si at veldig mange myndigheter, også her i dag, snakker hele tiden om Putin, som at det en sånn ekstern trussel. Men i Norge så har vi dyrket troll i tusenvis av år i eventyrene. Så vi trenger ikke den innflytelsen utenfra for å få dette opp, og de ikke anonyme heller. Altså Donald Trump ikke anonym. De største sprederne av desinformasjon i Norge jo ikke anonyme. Det folk som står frem. Tucker Carlson ikke anonym. Og Fox News ikke en anonym kanal, ikke sant? Så hele poenget nettopp, som Bente sier, definisjonen av falske nyheter, desinformasjon, veldig vanskelig. Kanskje unødvendig også.
Ja, og så det jo riktig at det har eksistert i alle tider. Altså, jeg husker etter Irak-krigen at det var noe sånn som 80% av republikanerne som var helt sikre på at Osama bin Laden var involvert, at Saddam Hussein var involvert i angrepene 11. september. Men hvis det vanskelig å måle, og det et problem som har eksistert lenge, Bente, det liksom da desinformasjonen, eller det den politiske polariseringen i samfunnet som den største utfordringen?
Ja, altså det vi har sett at politisk tilhørighet kan ha ganske stor betydning for om du tror på den type desinformasjon. Så det kan være sånn at der du står politisk kan være en større predikator for om du tror på det, eller om hvorvidt det blitt spredt i stor grad. Så vi vet at det enkelte miljø som mer mottagelige for det, og da det særlig sånn som ble snakket om tidligere, med lav tillit til mediene, lav tillit til forskning, til politikere, at det kan være en sånn kjennetegn på de som da i større grad tror på desinformasjon.
Eirik, jeg refererte jo til en artikkel du skrev i fjor om DALL-E, dette verktøyet som kan generere bilder. Det virker jo nå som liksom, oldtidsteknologi sammenlignet med Midjourney, og så har vi jo andre former for KI som som lager tekst for oss og kan lage kode og hva som helst. Du var veldig entusiastisk i den artikkelen og snakket om dette som en revolusjon på linje med internetts tilblivelse. Du like positiv nå, eller ser du noen uværsider som forkludrer for solskinnet?
Spørsmålet rundt dette med desinformasjon, det som vi snakker om her, så i første omgang så er jeg ikke så bekymret her i Norge, fordi at vi har faktisk et demokrati som fungerer, vi har et utdanningssystem som fungerer, og vi har en presse som fungerer veldig bra. Og vi har høy tillit til politikerne og til pressen, altså det er mange ting her hvor vi er bra rigget. Men så er det jo en sånn, det brygger jo opp til en form for sånn perfekt storm her som jeg er litt bekymret for. Og da jeg skrev den artikkelen, det var ganske nøyaktig et år siden omtrent, og sammenlignet dette med liksom sånn iPhone-moment, eller første gang jeg prøvde internett og så videre. Og så hadde jo vist seg det at det tok litt av det greiene der. Men den perfekte stormen som vi ser der, for vi snakker veldig mye om kunstig intelligens akkurat nå, fordi at den siste runden innenfor kunstig intelligens med denne generativ AI, den har gjort det så utrolig tydelig for folk. Det har blitt så visuelt. Vi har jo på med AI i mange, mange, mange år, men det har liksom ligget og lurt i bakgrunnen der. Så maskinlæring og alle disse tingene har vi holdt på med, men når du kan skrive inn en setning, og så får du et bilde som du kan se med dine egne øyne, eller du får en tekst du kan lese, så har jo det gjort at det er på alle slepper, og alle, hva er dette for noe? Men hvis vi begynner å slå sammen disse tingene, for vi har jo blitt påvirket av AI, noe så til de grader gjennom de algoritmene som styrer det vi ser på, og de er jo alt for effektive, så det er jo heroin, liksom. Altså, de funker så bra at vi blir helt avhengige av å sitte og scrolle. Og det ser vi at det er ikke så bra, og den er det jo enda. Og så kombinerer du den med det som denne generative AI-greien gjør, nemlig det er jo en enormt mye høyere både kvantitet og kvalitet på det du kan automatisk produsere da. For det har jo alltid vært mulig å sitte i Photoshop og lage falske bilder, og det har alltid vært mulig å sette deg ned og skrive bambus, liksom. Mens nå kan du ved tastetrykk få gjort det samme. Så det blir jo høyere kvalitet og kvantitet på det. Og så i tillegg, når du har både disse algoritmene som styrer litt hva vi egentlig får med oss her i verden, og så gjør du det mye enklere å lage falske nyheter, da må vi i etablerte medier altså virkelig holde tunga beint i munnen. For det er ingen tvil om at i løpet av de siste årene så har også de etablerte mediene i Norge pirket litt mer, begynt å leke litt mer med clickbait, og litt mer, for det er jo en dreining der, og de tingene til sammen er litt ugunstige. Så det positive er jo sånn som faktisk verifiserbar, altså dette samarbeidet vi gjør, og jeg er stolt av, for litt over et år siden, når Ukraina-krigen brøt ut, så var det alle mann til pumpen i NRK. Vi skal ikke publisere noe som vi ikke har verifisert. Så det var sånn at jeg ble røsket ut av beta, gikk i turnus i nyhetsavdelingen for å sitte og verifisere videoer. Altså alle i hele NRK som kan du litt om internett, liksom. Kom hit. Men det var veldig, veldig, veldig flinke mennesker trukket inn fra hele NRK. Og så fikk man på plass på rekordtid verifiserbar her nede. Så det er jeg veldig stolt av. Og det var før generativ AI hadde tatt av og så videre, så var vi likevel, og der må vi jo fortsette. Og jeg har vært veldig mye rundt og snakket om disse tingene, snakket for alt fra Stortinget til mediebransje, og det jeg legger merke til når jeg snakker mye for fagfolk, og jeg er jo teknologioptimist, og jeg har ikke sånn slide deck som er bare sånn skremme, men jeg ser at når jeg er ferdig å snakke, så sitter hele salen og er livredde. De er skrekkslaget livredde for å miste jobben sin, for nå er det jo ingenting som er sant lenger, og så videre. Så vi må jo være ekstremt nøye, altså vi som sitter i pressen, vi trenger ikke å spre frykt, for frykten er der allerede, men vi skal spre informasjon. Det tror jeg er ekstremt viktig her, at vi fortsetter å være veldig ryddige og opplyse publikum der ute også. For det er vi som sitter her nå vet veldig mye om dette her, men det gjør ikke folk flest. Et godt eksempel var jo Amnesty som lager da AI-genererte bilder for å vise et poeng, og de skriver til og med hvit skrift på bildet. Dette er AI-generert, men det funker jo ikke i det hele tatt. Det er jo i det du får den muligheten til å lage ting som ser så fotorealistisk ut. Så det er liksom der har vi en jobb å gjøre også i skoleverket. Altså utdannelsesinstitusjonene må jo hive seg på og få dette inn i opplæringen.
Bente?
Ja, hvis vi kan kaste inn et tema som vi ikke har snakket så mye om, men som kan bli et større problem. Og det går på forretningsmodeller. I Norge så det størst betalingsvillighet for journalistikk i verden, ifølge Reuters. Så det veldig mange som betaler for å komme bak betalingsmuren. Men det gjør i hvert fall ikke de unge. Så vi kan i større grad se et skille mellom de som villige til å betale for journalistikk, som kvalitetssikret og som følger Vær varsom-plakaten, og de som ikke villige til å gjøre det. Der det vil være ymse. Og en annen ting, det vil de unge komme til å venne seg til å lese nyheter. I dag så de oppfostret på sosiale medier, på TikTok, på Snapchat. Når vi ser på spørreundersøkelser hva de unge betaler for, og også de, altså 30-40, så det film, TV, musikk, men ikke journalistikk.
Og snart Midjourney og alle disse kule...
Så i Norge så har vi fått til i stor grad en overgangen til digitale abonnement, men får vi med oss alle, og kan det gjøre at vi kan bli mer utsatt, eller deler av befolkningen blir mer utsatt for desinformasjon, for den ikke villig til å betale.
Jeg tror ballen ble lagt for dine føtter igjen her, Lars.
Ja, nei, det et stort dilemma det, og vi kan ikke bare gå rundt og forutsette at bare de blir gamle nok, så kjøper de et abonnement på Aftenposten eller Dagbladet. Det vil jo ikke skje. Og derfor så får vi det dilemmaet at de etablerte redaktørstyrte mediene også må være til stede på TikTok og på Snap og sånne ting, for i alle fall å vise at vi finnes der ute. Og så har du alle de problemene det fører med seg. Men det et stort dilemma. Samtidig så det jo også sånn at de unge har etter min mening mye større evne til å skille hva som tull og tøys og hva som ekte. Det kan være at det sågerforskning, du kan korrigere meg på det, men det en stor utfordring på det. For at selv om gjennomsnittsalderen til en abonnent har gått ned fra den tiden vi bare hadde papiraviser, der jo gjennomsnittsalderen nå over 70, så det jo fortsatt relativt gamle etablerte folk på 45-50 som kjøper abonnement på digitale abonnement.
Fordelen at de yngre blir eldre de også.
Ja, så levealderen går opp og så videre, men det hjelper ikke med for 17-åringene og 22-åringene.
Hvilket siste ord?
Ja, og det jo dessverre ikke den erfaringen vi har. Vi har jo en egen skoleavdeling med pedagoger og lærere og eksperter i Faktisk, og jeg tror Bente sikkert kan bekrefte det, at de unge veldig gode på å bruke teknologien, men å forstå den, de fortsatt barn. Og det der dilemmaet at de vokst opp uten et skille mellom redaktørstyrte medier eller etablerte medier, og når de leser VG eller Dagbladet på TikTok, så de ikke klar over at de VG eller Dagbladet, de først og fremst på TikTok. Og det jo der man også ser skoleverket mangler de verktøyene og de metodene de skal til nettopp å få innprentet kildebevissthet og kritisk mediebruk i de unge, som vi også ser et kjempeproblem hos de eldre som har kanskje falt utenfor arbeidslivet, pensjonister eller andre, som heller ikke har det nettverket rundt seg, eller de mentorene rundt seg de trenger for å bli oppdatert digitalt. Da. Så jeg vet ikke, Bente.
Dere, tiden går fort når man har det gøy. Jeg har i hvert fall hatt det gøy, så den tiden har bare løpt av gårde. Jeg vil bare si, fordi jeg overhørte i sted, at hvis man vil lære mer om KI og hvordan det kan brukes og hva man skal være på vakt for i journalistikken, så vet jeg at Institutt for Journalistikk, som holder til her, har kurs på det på gang, så det kan man jo følge med på. Tusen takk til dere fire. Thank you very much, you guys, and tusen takk for at dere kom hit i dag til frokostmøte, og så ses vi neste gang. Takk for nå.